Coming up on Arirang News. South Korea is experiencing temperatures well above those normally seen at this time of the year, with the capital reaching over 30 degrees Celsius. Tonight, we take a look at what's behind this unusual heat wave. Marking the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations between South Korea and Canada, a high-level joint meeting was held in Seoul involving foreign and industry ministers. Economic security cooperation was discussed at the so-called 2+2 meeting, the first such talks between the two countries. South Korea's auto exports last month rose to a new all-time high for the month of April, mainly thanks to the popularity of eco-friendly cars. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with the unseasonably warm temperatures here in the country. It seems South Korea has already taken a dive into summer, with the mercury hitting well over 30 degrees Celsius in the capital, as well as several parts of the nation. And it's not just here, as it's a similar story elsewhere in the world. Our Song Yujin tells us what's behind it.
It seems the fight against summer heat has already started in South Korea. On Tuesday, daytime high temperatures in parts of the country hit 30 degrees Celsius or higher, exceeding their highest temperatures so far this year. So here in the capital Seoul, temperatures hit 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 7 degrees higher than the average temperature for this time of the year.
I can definitely feel that the weather is much warmer this month when compared to the past. Based on my 84 years of life, May used to be cool or sometimes even quite chilly.
I sweat like crazy when I'm outside. The weather is scorching both inside and out, so I hope our school turns on the air conditioner soon.
Besides Seoul, the cities of Gangneung, Gwangju, and Gyeongju recorded 35, 32, and 34 degrees Celsius each. These temperatures are normally seen during the midsummer month of July. The Korea Meteorological Administration says this is due to hot and humid air from the south and migratory anticyclones heating up the ground. But the fundamental cause? Global warming.
This is not the first time temperatures have surpassed 30 degrees Celsius in May. If we compare Earth to a big pot, the pot has been slowly heating up over the past years due to global warming without us recognizing it. And we're feeling that change now through these high temperatures.
These extreme temperatures are being seen elsewhere in the world too, such as in the US, Canada, Europe, and Southeast Asia. Countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and Myanmar have already seen several days where temperatures exceeded 40 degrees Celsius.
Global warming is one of the causes of this exotic weather, and there are several studies saying temperatures in the northern hemisphere have risen due to higher sea temperatures this year caused by the El Niño phenomenon.
El Niño is when waters in the Pacific Ocean become much warmer than usual, causing heat waves and strong storms, and ultimately, higher temperatures. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
Addressed at today's weekly cabinet meeting was President Yoon Suk-yeol's blueprint of his economic visions for his second year in office. Our Kim Do-yeon with the details.
Presiding over the first cabinet meeting of his second year in term on Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol said the only way for South Korea to get its economy booming was through trade. And this needs to be achieved through private market-driven growth, or what he labels liberal democracy for the economy.
우리 경제는 세계 시장 속으로 과감하게 파고들어가 수출과 투자 유치를 함으로써 활로를 찾을 수 있는 것입니다. 따라서 우리 경제 시스템을 글로벌 스탠다드에 부합시키지 않으면 안 됩니다. 자유시장 원리는 글로벌 스탠다드로서 이를 무시하면 우리 경제의 미래는 없습니다.
President Yoon cited a few achievements from his first full year to say he's on the right track, boasting the more than $410 billion private investment into key technology industries, including semiconductors, batteries, and biosciences. The president also said that his diplomacy will center around the nation's economic growth. And this comment comes as he's about to start a week of back-to-back summits, starting with the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the G7 summit, which will be followed by some European leaders' visit to Seoul.
세계 경제의 불안정성과 공급망 분절 상황에서 대외 의존도가 높은 우리 경제의 살 길은 수출과 투자 유치에 달려 있습니다. 경제를 외교의 중심에 놓는 글로벌 중추 외교로 우리 경제의 활로를 모색해 나갈 것입니다.
He also said a healthy fiscal policy has been established by his government, saying his administration will refrain from mindlessly distributing cash like a populist. In fact, the fiscal plan for this year rose by 5.2%, the smallest rise in government spending since 2017. And for the sustainable growth of the country beyond just his term, he reiterated his will to finish his three main reformations: labor practices, pension system, and education. He promises to instill the rule of law in the nation's labor scene. For education, he said progress is being made to make it centered on creativity and diversity. As for the pension system, he says it'll be a process that needs time for public consensus, but it will be done during his term. 김도현, Arirang News.
South Korea's auto exports continue to beat the global market doldrums. The country's outbound shipments of cars last month rose to a new all-time high for the month of April, mainly thanks to the popularity of eco-friendly cars. Lee Soo-jin reports.
South Korean car makers achieved record-high exports in April amid the nation's extended losing streak in overall exports. Data from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy shows that the value of car exports last month totaled $6.2 billion. That's the highest on record for the month of April. The cumulative value of auto exports from January to April this year was also the highest ever, reaching a whopping $23.2 billion. Around 247,000 cars were exported in April, up more than 25% on year. This was largely driven by robust demand for eco-friendly cars in North America and the EU. Exports to North America surged around 53%, while the figure for the EU was up almost 30% compared to the previous year. The dollar value of total outbound shipments of eco-friendly vehicles surpassed the $2 billion mark for the third consecutive month, coming in at $2.05 billion, rising nearly 56% on year. In terms of units, the number of eco-friendly cars exported jumped around 33% on year to more than 63,000. This comes as domestic eco-friendly commercial vehicles became eligible to receive subsidies under the Inflation Reduction Act with the U.S. Treasury Department's new guidance regarding battery sourcing. Domestic sales of eco-friendly cars were also up in April, increasing more than 13% from a year earlier to nearly 45,000 units. Meanwhile, car production was up by almost 25% to more than 380,000 units on the back of a recovery in the supply chain for related parts, such as automotive chips. The auto and auto parts industry's operating profit jumped nearly 82% on year during the first quarter, with sales in the auto parts sector surging 26%, the largest on-year rise out of all the business sectors. This comes as the IT sector turned red during the same period, posting an operating deficit as the nation continues to grapple with the ongoing decline in the chip sector, the nation's key export area. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
This year marks the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations between South Korea and Canada. Today, officials from the two countries held high-level talks in Seoul to discuss ways to strengthen cooperation on economic security. Baeunji reports.
Ahead of the summit between the two countries' leaders, on Tuesday, 4 high-level officials from South Korea and Canada's Foreign and Trade Ministries sat down for talks. Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin and his Canadian counterpart Melanie Joly, as well as Seoul's Trade Minister An Deok-gun and his counterpart Francois Philippe Champagne, took part in the meeting. South Korea's foreign ministry said the 4 ministers shared their country's policies on economic security and that they exchanged views on ways to strengthen their partnership in various fields, including supply chains of key minerals and semiconductors, as well as green energy like hydrogen and natural gas. This was the first time that the meeting was held after the two sides agreed to establish this high-level dialogue in September last year, during a summit between the two countries' leaders. South Korea's foreign minister called the meeting historic, as this kind of 2+2 economic security dialogue is the first of its kind for both Korea and Canada with any other country.
It can serve as a model for other strategic consultation mechanisms that Korea and Canada will be pursuing going forward.
The country's trade minister also stressed that the dialogue will expand bilateral cooperation.
I'm confident that these meetings will deepen the strategic and comprehensive cooperation between our two nations.
The Canadian foreign minister, who has now visited South Korea 3 times in a span of just 8 months as a foreign minister, stressed that Canada aims to bring the bilateral relationship to another level.
We've always been good friends, but we want to be best friends.
The Canadian trade minister highlighted that bilateral trade volume is now at around $20 billion, and he's looking to expand that.
And I think what we want to build with our Korean friends is supply chain based on values, that would ensure more resiliency and less dependency on other regimes that would be less reliable.
Tuesday's meeting comes a day ahead of the summit between South Korean President Yoon and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, marking 60 years of the two countries' diplomatic relations. The Canadian Prime Minister will visit South Korea before heading to Japan for the G7 summit in Hiroshima. Baeunji, Arirang News.
South Korea's homegrown KF-21 보람의 fighter jet has been given a tentative green light for combat suitability. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration on Tuesday announced that the evaluation was made following hundreds of ground and test flights carried out over the last 2 years. The agency says the provisional evaluation has laid the foundation to proceed with the initial mass production planned to begin next year. The fighter jet is capable of traveling 2,200 kilometers per hour and is equipped with advanced technologies that can track multiple targets. The final combat suitability evaluation is expected in 2026. South Korea today resumed nationwide civilian air defense drills for the first time in 6 years to strengthen the nation's response capabilities to North Korea's provocations. Organized by the Ministry of Interior and Safety, the drill began at 2 p.m. and lasted for 20 minutes. The participants included employees of government ministries, affiliated agencies, and public institutions, as well as all faculty and students in schools nationwide. During the exercise, people were given emergency instructions and safety education. The government plans to expand the next drills to include the entire population. President Yoon vetoes another opposition-led act, this time the Nursing Act, citing too much conflict between relevant medical groups. Rival parties show starkly different reactions. Our political correspondent Han Sung-woo has the latest.
Exercising his veto power for the second time since taking office, South Korean President Yoon rejected the opposition-backed Nursing Act on Tuesday, saying it could harm public health by causing chaos in the medical system.
국민 건강은 다양한 의료 전문 직역의 협업에 의해 제대로 지켜질 수 있는 것입니다. 이번 간호 법안은 이와 같은 유관 직역 간의 과도한 갈등을 불러일으키고 있습니다.
The proposed law aims to improve the working conditions of nurses by outlining the roles and duties of licensed nurses separately from the current Medical Service Act, which puts them under the guidance of physicians. But it's a contentious bill that has pit South Korea's nurses against its doctors, who fear it will lead to confusion in the public health system if nurses can open their own clinics. Nursing assistants, meanwhile, have claimed it would discriminate against them while privileging nurses. Over at the National Assembly, the ruling People Power Party welcomed President Yoon's veto, saying the bill threatened to destroy the country's medical infrastructure.
It was inevitable and perfectly natural for President Yoon to veto this bill. It would divide South Korea's medical community and put its public health system at risk of collapse.
The Democratic Party of Korea, on the other hand, claimed the president, in vetoing the bill, broke with one of his election pledges, an allegation an official at the presidential office denies.
His inability to fulfill an election pledge demonstrates his incompetence, and he has shown contempt for the legislative power of the National Assembly.
That view was echoed by the head of the Korean Nurses Association, who warned that the country's nurses would engage in collective action against the veto.
We are declaring the launch of a movement under a 2023 general election planning team to convict and remove from office politicians and bureaucrats who are unfair and lack common sense.
In a briefing later in the day, Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong vowed to reduce the excessive workloads of South Korea's nurses through a government plan announced last month. Yoon's veto means the Nursing Act will be sent back to Parliament. For his veto to be overridden, however, the bill must win 2/3 approval in a vote taken by a majority of the National Assembly's lawmakers, making its enactment unlikely. 한성우, Arirang News.
An annual report by the U.S. State Department that assesses actions against freedom of religion raises concerns about North Korea. For more, here's our Lee Si-hoo.
The right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion continues to be denied in North Korea, with no alternative belief systems tolerated by the authorities, read the U.S. Department of State's annual report to Congress on international religious freedom. The 2022 report on international religious freedom, which describes the status of religious freedom in every country, released Monday, showed special concern for the violation of the right to freedom of thought in North Korea. It highlighted that the situation had not fundamentally changed since the publication of the 2014 UN Commission of Inquiry report on human rights in the DPRK, which found that authorities almost completely denied the rights to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. It also said that the authorities in many instances committed human rights violations that constituted crimes against humanity. The regime reportedly continued to execute, torture, arrest, and physically abuse individuals for religious activities. It also notes that COVID-19 restrictions on travel to and from the country further reduced information about conditions, making details on cases of abuse and estimates involving religious groups difficult to verify. However, data was provided by the NGOs Korea Future, Open Doors USA, and the Database Center for North Korean Human Rights to show the severity of persecution of religious groups. As for China, the report cited religious groups, NGOs, and international media reports that pointed out that the government is continuing to assert control over religious groups and restrict activities it perceives as threatening to the state or CCP interests. The U.S. Department of State submits the reports in accordance with the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. North Korea and China are on the Department of State's list of countries of particular concern. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
In Myanmar, more casualties and damage have been reported after cyclone Mocha struck the country on Sunday. Our Lee Daeon has the latest.
Many in Myanmar are feared dead after the powerful cyclone Mocha struck in the region at the weekend. AFP on Tuesday reported that the death toll in cyclone-hit villages of Rakhine State has risen to at least 41. The storm had largely passed by late Sunday, carrying winds of up to 195 kilometers per hour, the biggest storm to hit the Bay of Bengal in more than a decade. Sunday's storm ripped roofs off homes and brought a storm surge that inundated the state capital, Seatway. Residents of the western region, too, where there is a large population of Rohingya Muslims, said at least 100 people had died and many more were missing.
Yesterday, when the storm came, it blew the roof and walls off of our home. Then we ran for shelter with our children. The wind was so strong that it almost blew people off the ground when they ran. Many people fell over while running for shelter. We have not seen a storm like this before.
I stayed home after sending my family to the cyclone shelter. When the storm came, a sudden gust of wind blew the roof off my house. Next, the walls and fences were blown off. And again, another gust of wind took everything. I was sitting here and could do nothing.
Rescuers on Monday evacuated about 1,000 people trapped by seawater 3.6 meters deep along the country's western coast. Myanmar's military information office said the storm had damaged houses and electrical transformers in Seatway. It also said roofs were torn off buildings on the Coco Islands about 425 kilometers southwest of the country's largest city, Yangon. Several injuries were reported in neighboring Bangladesh. A Bangladesh government official said the damage was still being assessed, but that about 2,000 homes had been destroyed, and although no deaths have been reported, around 10,000 others have been injured. Lee-Hyun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, over in Vietnam, the 2023 K-pop Lovers Festival, organized by the Vietnam Korea Cultural Center, concluded successfully over the weekend. At Hoan Kiem Lake Square, located in the middle of Hanoi on Saturday, over 30,000 people were there for what was the 10th edition of the festival. This year, there were K-pop dance cover and singing competitions for the 21 teams who had advanced from the regional qualifiers held earlier in the year. There were also other events for people to enjoy, including a Korean culture exhibition hall and a K-culture quiz show. The festival first began in 2013 and has been held every year except 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Overall temperatures will drop a couple notches tomorrow, but unseasonable heat will continue. Highs in Seoul will be about 4 degrees higher than the seasonal norms at 27 degrees. Other regions such as Cheongju and Gyeongju will see maximum temperatures hitting over 30 degrees or even higher. The entire nation is set to see strong UV rays and high ozone levels. Make sure to wear plenty of sunblock in order to avoid any skin aggravation. For the East Coast, gusty offshore winds are in the forecast. The combination of strong winds and warm temperatures can lead to wildfires, so please be extra careful. Morning temperatures will be in the similar range tomorrow. Seoul, Daegu, and Busan will all be kicking off at 17 degrees. Wide temperature gaps are expected with highs jumping significantly. Seoul will be reaching 27, Daejeon and Gwangju 30, Gyeongju will be hot at 33 degrees. In between Thursday and Friday, parts of the south, including Jeju Island, will see showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for tonight's newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the latest news tomorrow. Have a good night.